The grand halls of the imperial palace were alive with tension. Normally, the air was filled with calm murmurs, soft footsteps, and the quiet elegance of the court. Today, however, the whispers carried fear, and the polished marble floors seemed to tremble under the weight of worry. At the center of the throne room sat Empress Lysera, the jewel of the empire, her normally radiant eyes shadowed with fatigue. She was beautiful, regal, and strong, yet now she seemed fragile, like a candle flickering in a storm. Around her, the advisors moved in frantic chaos. Their robes gleamed with wealth and rank, but their faces were pale, eyes wide with panic. Each advisor shouted over the other, voices filled with fear, confusion, and accusations. "This is unacceptable. We cannot allow this to happen," one snapped, pounding a fist against the table. "The empire will crumble if we do not act immediately." Another advisor whispered about omens, shaking as he spoke of curses and signs from the heavens. He pointed at nothing, as if invisible shadows were pressing in on the Empress from all sides. "The stars warn us. The throne is not safe." Yet through all the chaos, one figure stood calm, steady, and unshaken. Captain Jonah, the human guard, moved silently across the marble floor. Unlike the advisors, he was not dazzled by titles, not intimidated by rank or protocol. He simply observed. He watched the subtle tremors in the Empress's hands, the faint quiver in her lips, and the way her eyes seemed to search for something beyond the room. Jonah had been assigned to protect the Empress personally, not because of politics, but because she had chosen him. She had seen something in him, a steadiness, a courage that the rest of her court could not offer. Now, as the advisors shouted and argued, Jonah's sharp gaze saw what they could not. He saw fear twisting into something far darker, something invisible yet terrifying. Lysera's hands shook as she lifted them to steady herself. Her mind raced, haunted by visions that made no sense to the others. Shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, whispers that crawled into her thoughts, twisting reality. She knew the advisors could not see what was happening. They were trapped in their own fear and pride. Only one person could understand. Jonah stepped closer, bowing slightly, careful to show respect, yet ready to act. "Your Majesty," he said softly, his voice steady and calm, "I am here. I will not let anything harm you. Whatever this is, you're not facing it alone." For a moment, Lysera's eyes softened, a flicker of relief crossing her face. It was subtle, almost invisible, but Jonah caught it. The others continued their arguing, oblivious to the silent exchange. Only he could see the truth. The Empress was under attack, not by armies or assassins, but by something far more insidious. A force that sought to twist her mind and break her spirit. The advisors debated strategies, drew up charts, and whispered frantically, but none of their plans mattered. If the Empress's mind fell, the empire would fall with it. Jonah understood this better than anyone. He did not need magic or political insight. He needed courage, focus, and presence. He needed to be the anchor that kept the Empress from being swept away by the invisible storm. And so, in the heart of the palace, surrounded by wealth, power, and fear, a single human guard prepared silently for a battle no one else could see. He would face shadows, whispers, and the unseen force that threatened the mind of the greatest ruler the galaxy had ever known. Jonah's resolve was simple, but powerful. He would protect her at all costs. And in that moment, as chaos roared around them, he became the only light the Empress could rely on. By the time night fell, the palace had grown eerily quiet. The torches flickered along the marble walls, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed almost alive. In her private chambers, Empress Lysera sat on the edge of a velvet chair, her hands trembling in her lap. Her normally poised face was pale, and her eyes, usually bright with confidence, were clouded with fear. The invisible weight pressing on her chest made every breath a struggle. Jonah, her human guard, stood near the doorway, his presence calm and unwavering. He did not speak unless necessary, but his eyes never left her. He understood that words could be dangerous now. They might distract her from the battle raging within her mind. The advisors had tried, of course. They had sent messages, offered counsel, and demanded she act. But their solutions were meaningless here. None of them could see the shadows that crept across her thoughts, the whispers that twisted her memories and painted the familiar faces of friends and allies as enemies. Lysara's voice broke the silence, barely more than a whisper. "Jonah, it feels like the palace itself is against me, like the throne wants me to fail. I see shadows in the hallways, hear voices that aren't there. I cannot trust my own eyes." Jonah stepped closer, lowering himself to sit on the floor beside her. "Tell me what you feel," he said softly, "even if it doesn't make sense. Speak it and I will listen. I will not let it control you." For hours Lysara spoke, her words tumbling out in a stream of fear and confusion. She spoke of visions of darkness crawling along the walls, of whispers that tried to convince her that the people she trusted most were betraying her. She described flashes of memory twisted into lies, of friends turning into enemies, of the empire itself crumbling beneath her feet. Jonah listened silently, nodding occasionally, never judging, never interrupting. He understood something the advisors did not. Sometimes the greatest danger was invisible, and only presence and trust could fight it. Jonah reached out, taking her trembling hands in his own. "You are stronger than this," he said. "I can't fight this for you, but I can stand with you. You are not alone. We face this together." Tears welled in Lysara's eyes. She had fought battles against armies, ruled nations, and faced assassins, but this was different. This was a war within herself, and no sword or strategy could cut it away. Yet here was a human guard, someone she had chosen not for his power or status but for his unwavering loyalty, standing beside her like a shield. His presence, calm and steady, anchored her, giving her the courage to keep speaking, to keep fighting. Hours passed. The night deepened, and gradually the whispers lost their power. Lysara felt the shadows in her mind weaken, pulled back by Jonah's steady support. She clung to his words, to the warmth of his hand, to the knowledge that someone saw her, not the Empress, not the ruler, but Lysara, the woman inside. Finally, she slumped back against the chair, exhausted but relieved. "No one else could have helped me," she whispered, voice breaking. "They cannot see it, but you saw everything." Jonah smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and quiet humility. "I am human," he said simply. "We cannot see magic, we cannot sense whispers, but we can see people. And I see you, Empress. Always." For the first time that night, Lysara felt a flicker of peace. She leaned slightly against Jonah, trusting him completely, feeling the weight on her chest ease. Outside, the palace remained unaware of the invisible war that had raged in her mind. The advisors would claim she had simply needed rest, but Lysara knew the truth. The only reason she had survived, the only reason she had not fallen to the shadows, was Jonah's steady presence, his courage, his humanity. And as the first light of dawn began to seep through the curtains, Lysara closed her eyes briefly, drawing strength from the human guard who had become her anchor in the storm. In a world of magic, politics, and deceit, it was not power that had saved her. It was the simple, unwavering loyalty of a human who refused to look away. The morning sun filtered through the palace windows, casting a golden glow across the grand halls. Yet the warmth could not reach the hearts of the advisors. Rumors of the Empress's strange behavior had spread like wildfire through the corridors. Her absence from the morning council only intensified the panic. Some whispered that she had lost her mind. Others murmured about curses and dark magic. The Empire had never seen such fear in the eyes of its most powerful advisors. Inside the council chamber, tension crackled like a live wire. Advisors argued endlessly, voices rising and falling in panic. Charts and maps were scattered across tables, and ink-stained fingers pointed accusingly in every direction. None of them understood the true danger, for it was invisible, silent, and relentless. Jonah escorted the Empress through the halls, keeping her close and shielded from the prying eyes of the court. His presence was calm, reassuring, a silent promise that no harm could reach her while he stood nearby. The advisors looked on in confusion and disdain. A human guard walking with the Empress? Some even dared to scoff, thinking him weak, unimportant, incapable of offering real protection. An older advisor finally burst, slamming his palm against the table. "Your Majesty, you cannot allow this human to dictate your decisions. He has no rank, no power, no authority in the court." Lysara stopped and turned, her posture regal, her eyes sharp and steady. "He does not need rank or power," she said firmly. "He sees what all of you cannot. This is not about titles or strategy. This is about my mind, my will, and the survival of the Empire." A young advisor stammered. But he is human. How can a human understand the dangers that face the throne?" The Empress's gaze softened as it met Jonah's. "Because he cares," she said quietly. "He understands loyalty, courage, and what it means to protect life, not just power. You may have all the knowledge, all the magic, all the years of study, but you cannot see the threat that comes from within. Only Jonah can." The council fell silent, stunned by the clarity of her words. Their pride, their confidence, their centuries of training, none of it mattered when the mind of the Empress was under siege by a force they could not comprehend. The advisors looked at Jonah with a mixture of fear, confusion, and reluctant respect. They did not fully understand, but they could see that he was different. Steady, unshakable, human. Jonah did not boast, did not respond to their questions or whispers. He simply stood by Lysara, a pillar of unwavering support. He did not need recognition or praise. His purpose was clear: to protect her, even from enemies no one else could see. "Perhaps you still do not understand," Lysara continued, her voice rising with quiet authority. "There is a threat that whispers lies, twists reality, and seeks to make me doubt myself. All your charts, your plans, and your knowledge will be useless if my mind falls. Only Jonah can face it. Only he can protect me from what you cannot see." The room was still. Some advisors bowed their heads in shame. Others fidgeted nervously, unable to challenge her words. The Empress had spoken the truth. Raw power, knowledge, and rank meant nothing against the quiet courage of a human who would not look away. Jonah's eyes met hers, and for a moment the room faded into the background. In that silent exchange there was understanding, trust, and a bond stronger than any law or decree. He did not need to fight with sword or spell. His strength lay in presence, in vigilance, in the human capacity to care when no one else could. As the council slowly realized the gravity of her words, Lysara straightened, regal and commanding. "From this day forward," she said, "those who truly wish to serve this empire must learn to see not just the world around them, but the hearts of those they protect. And they must respect the human who saved the Empress when none of you could." Jonah remained silent, but inside, a quiet satisfaction filled him. He did not seek glory, but he had earned the trust of the greatest ruler in the galaxy, and in that moment he understood that humanity, in its simplest form, could stand stronger than any magic, any knowledge, any title. Night had fallen again over the imperial palace, but this time the darkness felt heavier, almost alive. The grand corridors were quiet, yet shadows seemed to shift unnaturally, stretching and twisting along the walls as if they had a life of their own. Empress Lysara sat in her chambers trembling, her hands clutching the edge of her throne. Her chest heaved with each breath and her eyes darted nervously, seeing threats no one else could perceive. The invisible force that had haunted her mind in the past days had grown stronger. It whispered lies, whispered that her advisors had betrayed her, that her closest allies plotted in secret. It painted illusions of enemies where there were none, and every memory she had cherished was twisted into deceit. She felt alone, more alone than she had ever been, even while surrounded by hundreds of attendants and advisors. Jonah, her human guard, knelt beside her as he had every night since the attack on her mind began. His hand rested gently on hers, steady and grounding. He did not flinch at the shadows creeping along the walls, the faint whispers that seemed to crawl into the air. He had learned to see the world differently, not with eyes, but with attention, with care, with awareness of the human heart. "They're here again," Lysara whispered, her voice shaking. "They want me to give in, to lose myself completely." Jonah's gaze never wavered. "Then we fight them together," he said. "I cannot fight inside your mind, but I can hold you steady. I will not let them win." The shadows seemed to curl and hiss, reaching toward Lysara like grasping fingers. Jonah spoke softly, recounting stories of courage and loyalty, tales of humans facing impossible odds, of men and women who refused to bow to fear. Each word he spoke cut through the darkness, forming a protective shield around her. Lysara clung to his voice, drawing strength from the simple human truth that he represented: care, courage, and unwavering presence. Slowly the shadows faltered. The whispers faltered. The illusions wavered. She realized she was not entirely alone, that even if no one else could see or understand, Jonah's vigilance and humanity created a bridge back to reality. Hours passed. The invisible force tried again and again, but with Jonah by her side, Lysara's mind resisted. Her breathing grew steady, her trembling hands calmed, and her eyes regained their clarity. Each time she felt herself slip, Jonah's hand, his voice, his quiet strength pulled her back. Finally, exhaustion overcame both her fear and the whispers. She sank back into the chair, her body trembling from the effort, tears streaking her face. I thought I would lose myself," she said, voice breaking with relief and gratitude. "No one else could have saved me. Not the advisors, not the magic. Only you." Jonah squeezed her hand gently. "I told you," he said. "I see you, Empress. I will not let you fall. Your mind is yours, and I will protect it with everything I have." Lysara's lips curved into a faint, weary smile. For the first time since the assault on her mind began, she felt peace. Not complete, for the world still carried dangers, but the shadow that threatened to overwhelm her had been pushed back. The bond between them had grown unbreakable. Outside the chamber, the palace continued its life, oblivious to the silent war that had raged. The advisors would assume that the Empress simply needed rest, or that her fear had been exaggerated. They would never understand the invisible battle she had fought, nor the human who had stood beside her through every moment of it. But Lysara did. She would never forget. She had seen courage and loyalty in its purest form, unmeasured by title or rank, unshaken by fear or status. Jonah had proven that true strength was not always in magic, armies, or politics. It was in the human heart, steadfast and unwavering in the face of darkness. As dawn approached, Lysara leaned her head slightly toward Jonah, a silent gesture of trust and gratitude. The shadows had retreated, but she knew the real lesson had been learned. In a world of treachery, deceit, and unimaginable danger, humanity, the courage to care, to protect, to stand firm, could triumph over anything. And in that quiet moment, Empress and human guard shared a bond stronger than any magic, stronger than any throne, a bond forged in courage, loyalty, and the unyielding power of the human heart. The palace was quiet that morning, but tension still lingered in the air. Word had begun to spread, slowly, cautiously, about the strange events of the previous nights. The advisors could no longer ignore that something unusual had occurred, something beyond their understanding. Whispers traveled through the halls. The Empress had been under attack, not by armies or assassins, but by something invisible, something dangerous that had tested her mind and will. The council gathered again, this time under a heavier silence. Their usual arrogance had been replaced with a cautious respect, even fear. They looked at the Empress, and they looked at Jonah, standing silently at her side. There was a tension in the air, a realization that the human guard, someone they had once dismissed as weak, untrained, and insignificant, was at the heart of her survival. Lysara stepped forward, her posture regal and commanding. Her eyes swept over the advisors, sharp and unwavering. "You have all served this empire for years, and yet you failed to see what endangered it the most," she said. Her voice was calm but carried authority, echoing in the silent chamber. "All your charts, your strategies, your magic, none of it mattered when my mind was under attack. Only one person saw the danger and only one person acted." She paused, glancing at Jonah. "Jonah, the human guard, stood by me when no one else could. He did not falter, he did not hesitate. He protected me, not because it was his duty but because he chose to. That choice saved me. That choice saved the Empire." The advisors shifted uncomfortably. Some looked down at the polished floors, unwilling to meet her gaze. Others whispered among themselves, trying to rationalize the truth they could not deny. A human had acted with courage and clarity that surpassed their own years of training and wisdom. One of the senior advisors, a stern figure with a lifetime of service, finally spoke, his voice heavy with reluctant respect. "Your Majesty, if what you say is true, then Jonah's actions were indeed extraordinary." Lysara nodded. "They were, and I will make it clear. His place is not simply at the door guarding the throne. He stands beside me as my protector, my confidant, and my anchor. He is a human, yes, but he embodies the strength, courage, and loyalty that this empire must value above all else." A murmur of surprise swept through the room. Humans had never been regarded as equals, not in matters of power or strategy. They were seen as fragile, limited, and incapable of matching the intelligence or skill of other races in the Empire. Yet here was proof that humanity could surpass expectation, that human courage could shine where magic, wisdom, and experience fell short. Jonah, silent as always, bowed slightly. He did not seek recognition, but he could feel the respect in the room shifting, subtle yet undeniable. He had never been trained to command or to lead. He had been trained to protect, and in doing so, he had accomplished something far greater than glory or title. He had earned the trust of the Empress and the silent acknowledgement of all who witnessed it. Lysara turned to face the council one last time, her eyes burning with quiet authority. "From this day forward, let it be known that strength is not measured by title, magic, or power alone. True strength is courage, loyalty, and the willingness to act when no one else will. And today that strength has been proven by a human named Jonah." The room fell into a respectful silence. Some advisors nodded. Others swallowed hard, all realizing that the hierarchy they had relied on for decades could not contain this truth. Humanity, so often underestimated, had just changed the balance of respect in the Empire forever. Lysara stepped back, her hand brushing lightly against Jonah's shoulder. The gesture was subtle, but it spoke volumes. Trust, gratitude, and recognition that went far beyond words. The human guard who had faced the invisible threat, who had held her steady when all else failed, was now more than a protector. He was a symbol of hope, of courage, and of the extraordinary potential within humanity itself. And in that quiet, powerful moment, the Empress and her human guard shared a bond that no whisper, shadow, or doubt could ever break. Humanity had triumphed, not with magic, not with armies, but with the unwavering heart of one human who refused to look away. The days after the invisible threat had passed were quiet, but the palace still buzzed with whispers. The advisors avoided direct eye contact with Jonah, their pride wounded, their previous arrogance replaced with an uneasy respect. They could not understand how a human guard, one they had once dismissed as weak, had saved the Empress, protected her mind, and preserved the Empire without a single spell or strategic maneuver. Empress Lysara, however, did not notice their discomfort. Her focus was elsewhere, on the one person who had stood steadfastly by her side. Jonah moved through the palace like a silent shadow, always near but never intrusive. He had earned his place beside her, not through authority but through unwavering courage and loyalty. In her private chambers, Lysara often watched him as he kept vigil. She had ruled for years, commanding armies, managing political alliances, and facing threats that would have shattered lesser leaders. But the events of the past nights had taught her something new. Strength was not measured only in power or intellect. Strength was measured in the heart and courage, in the ability to stand firm when no one else could. Jonah noticed her gaze and gave a small, reassuring smile. "You've been through a lot, Your Majesty," he said quietly. "But you did not fall. That proves your strength, not just mine." Lysera leaned back, her eyes glimmering with gratitude. "No," she said softly. "You did not let me fall. You stood when everyone else panicked. You saw what none of them could. That is worth more than any throne, any magic, any advisor's wisdom." The human guard bowed slightly, humble as always. "I only did what was right," he replied. "I could not abandon you when you needed me." Their bond deepened each day, growing beyond the simple relationship of ruler and protector. Jonah's presence gave Lysera confidence not only in herself, but in the decisions she made for the Empire. His quiet strength reminded her that she could rely on trust, loyalty, and humanity as much as on armies and laws. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lysera and Jonah walked through the palace gardens. The air was fragrant with the blooms of 1,000 flowers, yet even this beauty was dwarfed by the weight of the lessons she had learned. She glanced at him and spoke honestly, without the formality that usually coated her words. "You know," she said, "all my life I have relied on advisors, maps, and strategy, but none of them could see what mattered most. None of them could understand the danger that came from inside my own mind. You changed that. You taught me that courage and loyalty are stronger than any magic or knowledge." Jonah shook his head, humility in every movement. "I did not teach you, Empress. You taught me too. You taught me what it means to trust someone completely, to stand beside them even when the world doubts you. That is something worth more than any throne or title." Lysera smiled, the first genuine, unburdened smile in days. She reached for his hand, and for a moment they simply walked together, sharing the quiet understanding that had grown between them. In that simple act, the bond between ruler and human guard became unbreakable. It was no longer about protection alone, it was about trust, respect, and the recognition that humanity itself could rise above fear, above doubt, and above any obstacle. The advisors, watching from a distance, began to realize something profound. It was not magic that saved the Empress. It was not strategy, wealth, or rank. It was the courage of a single human heart that refused to falter, that chose to stand firm when no one else could. Humanity had triumphed in the most unexpected, yet undeniable way. And in the quiet of the palace gardens, under the fading light of the sun, Empress and human guard shared a truth that no council, no war, no shadow could ever take away. Trust, courage, and loyalty, the essence of humanity, were sometimes stronger than anything else in the universe. Years had passed since the night the shadows had threatened the Empress's mind. The palace had returned to its rhythm of councils, ceremonies, and politics, but no one forgot the events that had reshaped the empire in ways few could truly understand. The advisors still whispered, still tried to rationalize the impossible, but the truth was undeniable. A human guard had stood against a threat none of them could see, and he had protected the Empress when all others had failed. Empress Lysera walked through the halls with quiet confidence, her posture more regal than ever, but her eyes held a warmth and understanding that no throne or crown could grant. She had ruled through wars, through betrayal, and through countless crises, but the experience with the invisible threat had taught her the greatest lesson of all. Strength was not in magic, strategy, or titles. It was in courage, loyalty, and the heart of humanity itself. Jonah walked beside her as he always had, silently, steadfastly, his presence a constant reassurance. The other guards, the advisors, the court, they all watched, aware now that this human was no ordinary soldier. He did not wield magic, nor did he claim political authority. Yet he had saved the Empress, preserved her mind, and reminded the Empire that the power of humanity could surpass anything else. "Empress," Jonah said quietly, "the court respects you. But I hope they also understand what matters most. That true strength is often quiet, unassuming, and human. Lysara nodded, a gentle smile touching her lips. They will understand in time, she said. But you have shown me, Jonah, you have shown me that humanity, our courage, our loyalty, our willingness to stand when no one else will, can change the course of history. The advisors, standing in the chamber for morning council, could only watch. They had learned humility, though few admitted it openly. They had been reminded that wisdom and knowledge alone could not save a ruler when danger came in forms unseen. Only trust, courage, and a human heart had done that. Jonah did not seek praise. He had no desire for power or titles, yet Lysara ensured his deeds were recognized. Not as a reward, but as a testament to what humans could accomplish. She made it known that he would always stand beside her, not as a mere guard, but as a symbol of hope, loyalty, and the extraordinary potential that lay within humanity. The story of that night, the invisible threat, the whispers in the mind, the shadows that none but a human could resist, was never fully told to the world. To most, it remained a tale of mystery, but within the walls of the palace it became legend. It became a lesson that no advisor, no ruler, and no army could forget. Courage and loyalty, even in the humblest of forms, were sometimes stronger than magic, strategy, or centuries of wisdom. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, Lysara and Jonah stood atop the palace balcony, looking out over the city below. The light of the sunset bathed them in gold, and the air carried a quiet peace that had been earned through struggle and trust. Lysara turned to Jonah, her eyes filled with gratitude and admiration. "You saved more than me," she said softly. "You saved the Empire. You reminded everyone here what it truly means to protect, to care, and to stand when it matters most. You have shown that humans, even without magic or power, can rise above any challenge." Jonah bowed slightly, humble but proud. "I only did what any human would do," he said. "But perhaps that is enough." Lysara smiled, placing a hand lightly on his shoulder. "It is more than enough. It is everything." The city below continued its life, the empire moved forward, and the palace remained the heart of power. Yet within its walls a quiet truth endured, one that would outlast generations. Humanity, in its simplest and purest form, had triumphed. A human guard had seen what no one else could, acted when others hesitated, and reminded a galaxy that courage, loyalty, and love were powers greater than any sword, spell, or crown. And so Empress and human guard stood together, not just as ruler and protector, but as proof that humanity, the willingness to care, to act, and to stand firm, was the greatest strength the universe had ever known.